Okay, great. So I think we'll get started. First of all, I wanted to thank everyone for participating in our ongoing stakeholder process on our development of a clean heat standard for Massachusetts, and introduce those of us that are participating in the call today from MassDEP. My name is Will Space. I'm Senior Technical Advisor for Climate Programs within the Bureau of Air and Waste. We also have Assistant Commissioner Christine Kirby of the Bureau of Air and Waste, and 3 environmental analysts who are working closely with me on developing this program: Joshua Cook, Emily Lamb, and Angela Parnay. I'm going to turn it over to Emily or somebody for a little bit of logistical introductions, and then come back to me for a little bit more introduction.
Yeah, so I'll just quickly go over some Zoom meeting logistics. So as you heard, this meeting is being recorded, and we've put attendees on mute to minimize background noise. We'd ask that you stay that way throughout the presentation. And we'd like you to enter your name and affiliation if relevant in the participants panel. If you need to rename yourself, you can do this by clicking on the participants icon, and then to the right of your name, there's an option to rename yourself. And then on the next slide, we'll talk about how to participate. So the latter half of this meeting will be focused on answering clarifying questions and hearing substantive comments. If you'd like to ask a question or provide a comment, please raise your hand using the raise your hand function, which you can find on the participants panel. And when it's your turn, we'll notify you and ask you to unmute yourself. You can also ask questions and provide comments through the chat. If you're going to do this, we would ask that you wait to put your questions in until we finish the presentation, because we might end up answering your question throughout the presentation. And with that, I'll hand it back to Will.
Great, thanks, Emily. So again, the general outline here is we're starting with some introductions and review of some of what's come before. Then we'll hear some details about what we're thinking of for this early registration program for these full electrification projects. And then at the end, we'll take some questions and comments. And I do want to emphasize something Emily said. It helps us to run a more efficient meeting if people can hold off on putting questions and comments into the chat until we've completed the presentation, in case you have a question and it gets answered later on in the presentation or something. So that's just a quick request. Next slide. So we're not going to kind of go completely back to the basics of the origin of the clean heat standard here, but we did want to just remind you that this is a project we've been working on for quite some time now. It comes from a number of important documents produced by the state of Massachusetts as part of their Global Warming Solutions Act, our Global Warming Solutions Act, including a report from the Clean Heat Commission and a couple of versions of our Clean Energy and Climate Plan. And the idea was that we were tasked at MassDEP with developing a clean heat standard that's practical and cost effective and can be implemented in an equitable manner. So that's in general what we're doing here. And this is a part of an ongoing series of stakeholder meetings. And you'll hear a little bit more background from Emily and then get into the more of the technical part of the presentation. So I'll turn it over to Emily at this time.
Yeah, so just to provide a little bit of a reminder of what is a clean heat standard. So Clean Heat Standard is a regulatory program that would require heating energy suppliers to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions over time. And the companies that would be required to do this would include the suppliers of heating oil, propane, natural gas, and electricity. And these companies would demonstrate that they were reducing emissions by holding clean heat credits. In November of last year, we released a draft program framework that addresses key policy design topics that are listed over there on the right of this slide, including setting the standard, which companies are regulated, credit generation and compliance, flexibility and revenue. And at the same time, we also released straw regulatory language for a voluntary early registration program, which is the focus of today's meeting, and we'll talk about more later. But first, I want to just give a few reminders about our stakeholder process. So we've been holding virtual community meetings regularly, approximately every 4 to 6 weeks. And these meetings are content for a general audience and always have time for questions and comments. So there's a virtual community meeting tonight that will focus on this voluntary early registration program. And then we've also scheduled another set of meetings for early March. In addition to the virtual community meetings, we've been holding technical sessions that go into more detail on program design topics, including the draft program framework that I just talked about. So there's a technical session on that we held in December. And links and recordings of all of these meetings are up on our website, which I think can bring me to our next slide. Just want to highlight some of the resources that are available for stakeholders. So we've recently updated and reorganized our website to make it easier to navigate. But you can find information about the Clean Heat Standard program development, background on the Clean Heat Standard stakeholder meetings, and past input from stakeholders, including the comments that we've received and summaries of those comments. You can sign up for our email list to get updates about the Clean Heat Standard. And like I mentioned, there are slides and videos from all of our past stakeholder meetings. And then there's a page about heating fuel emissions reporting. So then talk a little bit about next steps on the next slide. So today we're talking about the voluntary early registration program discussion draft that we published last year. We're accepting comments on this, and we've asked for written comments by February 16th. We also formally proposed a heating fuel emissions reporting regulation. The formal comment deadline for that is February 23rd, and there were public hearings on that proposal earlier this week on February 6th. Like I mentioned, we're continuing to hold virtual community meetings, so we have the next set scheduled for late March. And then I also want to emphasize that we're continuously updating the FAQ document on our website, so you can check back there for updates on more information as we respond to questions that we get from stakeholders. So now we can move into the actual topic of today's presentation, which is the voluntary early registration program. This will just give you a little overview of the topics that we're going to talk about. So first, I'll give an overview of what's in the discussion draft voluntary early registration program. Then Angela will talk about how to participate and the eligibility criteria that are included. I will walk through the registration process, and then Angela will talk about inspection and record retention before we open things up for questions and comments. So on the next slide, we can talk about, here's an overview. So first, the Clean Heat Standard Voluntary Early Registration Program is a discussion draft. It's straw regulatory language. It is not a proposed regulation, and we're accepting comments and interested in feedback on all aspects of this discussion draft. It's an early action program that's designed to set up the procedures for full electrification crediting in the Clean Heat Standard, so full electrification of residential space heating. Participants would register and qualify for full electrification clean heat credits or checks after installing a heat pump as the residence's primary heating system. And then projects that qualify in this program could receive administrative benefits in generating emission reduction checks once the final Clean Heat Standard regulation is established. And I'll just emphasize again that we are looking for feedback on all elements of this program and everything that we present today. So with that, I'll hand it to Angela.
Thanks, Emily. In this section, we'll give a brief overview of how a homeowner may experience the voluntary early registration program, and then we'll talk a little bit about authorized agents and the clean heat and emissions tracking system. As a homeowner, the first step would be to install a qualified clean heat system. For the voluntary early registration program, this means either putting a heat pump in new construction or replacing an existing heating system with a heat pump that is sized to heat the entire home. The second step would be to complete a qualification application through which you'd be able to tell MassDEP about the installation of that clean heat system. And then once the application is completed, it would be submitted to us through the Clean Heat and Emissions Tracking System, also called CHETS, at which time we would review that application. If the system's eligibility is confirmed, then the clean heat system would be added to the Clean Heat Registry. Lastly, the clean heat system would then qualify for full electrification clean heat credits, also called checks for short. For any clean heat system, homeowners may choose to authorize a third party called an authorized agent to submit the information on their behalf. This can include submitting a qualification application, managing all documentation related to the program, and receiving and transferring any checks. An owner can choose an authorized agent by completing a signed agreement that the agent would then submit through CHETS as part of the qualification application. The Clean Heat and Emissions Tracking System will be the electronic online platform that would be used for many elements of the Clean Heat Standard. It would be designed to track check generation and ownership, as well as complete a variety of other central tasks. Such tasks would include filing qualification applications, issuing statements of qualification, registering clean heat systems, generating and tracking checks, storing data on those clean heat systems, and facilitating energy supplier emissions reporting. Such checks would essentially act as a backbone of the program. Next up are the eligibility criteria for the voluntary early registration program. To start, eligible technologies would be air source or ground source heat pumps. Air source heat pumps would move heat from the outdoor air, while ground source heat pumps transfer heat from the ground or a body of water. These may include networked geothermal systems. To be eligible, a clean heat system must be fully electrified. A fully electrified system is one that either removes all combustion space heating equipment or commits to only using any remaining equipment when the clean heat system is down, such as during repairs or servicing. In addition to this technology requirement, MassDEP proposes several other eligibility requirements that would apply to all clean heat systems. These proposed requirements include that all clean heat systems would be located within Massachusetts, be installed on or after a certain date, such as January 1st, 2024, be appropriately sized to heat the full home, such as by meeting 90 to 120% of the total heating load, be Energy Star certified, displace existing combustion heating or heat new construction, be registered at a residence that is not already registered within CHETS, be installed by licensed contractors, and conform to all municipal, state, and federal requirements. I'd like to reiterate that these are all proposed eligibility requirements, and we're welcoming comments on any item on this list. And we also welcome proposals for any additional eligibility requirements that we should consider as we continue to refine the program design. There are two additional eligibility criteria that we propose that apply to certain types of clean heat systems. First, for air source heat pumps, they must meet the cold climate specifications set forth by the Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnerships, NEEP, which identifies heat pumps suitable for efficient use in cold climates. And second, for clean heat systems that seek an equity designation, to be eligible for that equity designation, the clean heat system would need to serve a customer that is eligible for the low-income discount electricity rate available through their electric utility. As I mentioned, we're welcoming comments on all aspects of eligibility requirements. And now I will pass it to Emily to go over the registration process.
Great, thanks. Yeah, so in this section, I'll talk about submitting an application and then going through the review of the application and receiving clean heat credits or checks. So you would receive checks, you would need to submit an application through CHET, the online tracking system that Angela described earlier. And this qualification application would collect a variety of information about the project and the location. I'll go into each of these topics in a bit more detail on the next slides. So the qualification application would include basic project information, including the contact information for the applicant, the installation address where the heat pump was being installed, unique building identifiers, which could be something like an ID number associated with a complementary program or another state program, which we'll talk about a little bit later, the square feet of conditioned space, the property ownership information, electricity billing, meter identifiers, and the occupancy status, so whether a building is owner or renter occupied. It also collect information about the clean heat system itself, such as the make, model, and rated capacity. For projects that were seeking the equity designation, we'd collect information about the equity status, so demonstrating that the clean heat system was serving a consumer eligible for the low-income electricity rate. And then the application would also collect information about proof of installation, like an invoice, that would need to include details about the clean heat system that was installed, we'd also collect the name and contact information for the contractor installing the clean heat system and potentially other information that MassDEP identified as needed. And then finally, there would be an attestation, so a written statement that the applicant would be committing that all the information in the application was accurate, and then also committing to the eligibility requirements that Angela described earlier, so that either all of the combustion space heating in the residence has been removed, or if there is any remaining combustion space heating equipment, that the owner commits to limiting utilization of the remaining combustion equipment to during clean heat system downtime. And I just emphasize again that this could be submitted by the homeowner or by an authorized agent on their behalf. So then after an application is submitted, MassDEP would review it and notify the applicant electronically when the application is complete. And then if it's eligible, a statement of qualification would be issued in CHETS, which is the online platform Angela described earlier. And this statement of qualification would include the number of checks and how many of them are equity checks that would be generated by the clean heat system. And then after the statement of qualification was issued, that clean heat system would be added to the registry within CHETS. And on the next slide, we'll talk about the generation of the credits themselves. So after the project is registered, MassDEP would allocate the full electrification checks to the owner or their authorized agent. A clean heat system serving a single residence would generate one full electrification check. A clean heat system serving multiple residences would receive one full electrification check per residential unit that it serves. And then for any eligible checks to receive the equity designation, any eligible checks would receive the equity designation within the CHETS platform. So as an example, to make this a little more concrete, if you had a 10-unit multifamily building that was served by one clean heat system, that would receive 10 full electrification checks. And if 3 of the occupants in that 10-unit building were on low-income electric rates, 3 of those 10 checks would be designated as equity checks. So then I also want to talk about the voluntary early registration program identifies complementary programs, such as the Department of Energy Resources Alternative Portfolio Standard, the MassSAVE Energy Efficiency Programs, and other state or federal programs. And in the discussion draft that we've put out, we identify that MassDEP may choose to waive some of the application requirements for clean heat systems that participate in these programs. And we want to emphasize that we are particularly interested in stakeholder feedback on how we can best complement these existing programs. So with that, I think I'll hand it back to Angela.
Thanks, Emily. This last section is on inspection and record retention. Regarding document inspection, MassDEP may confirm the accuracy of the information submitted in order to participate in the voluntary early registration program, as well as request the information needed in order to monitor compliance and enforcement. After giving reasonable notice, MassDEP would also be able to inspect and copy records, conduct site visits to audit clean heat systems, and access related files and documents. For record retention, the documentation used to demonstrate eligibility for the voluntary early registration program should be kept for 5 years and provided to MassDEP as requested. We'll do a quick recap of everything we've gone over here today before moving on to questions and comments. In summary, the voluntary early registration program would allow owners who install eligible heat pumps that act as a residence's primary heating system to register in CHETS and generate full electrification clean heat credits. To participate, the clean heat system owner or their authorized agent would need to submit a qualification application, which would include information about the location, equipment, and eligibility of the clean heat system. After submitting the qualification application through CHETS, MassDEP would review applications and grant eligible clean heat systems a statement of qualification and register them in the clean heat registry within CHETS. Once registered, that clean heat system would then generate clean heat credits that would be assigned to the owner. MassDEP may request to audit documentation or equipment, and records must be retained for at least 5 years. I will now turn it over to Will.
Great, thanks, Angela and Emily. So I'm going to turn it back over to you to respond to questions and comments in a minute, but I just wanted to take a minute to emphasize a few of the things that we're most interested in hearing about at this stage. One is, in general, is there other, and Emily mentioned this, are there other eligibility sorts of things that we should be considering when we think about this early registration program? And along the same lines, is there anything that really should be ineligible, for example, projects that are happening under MassSave, projects at homes that aren't weatherized, or maybe even just, limiting the crediting to equity projects as we've identified them in various places in the framework. And then the other thing, very important to us is how can we minimize administrative barriers and burdens related to participating in the program. That's always an effort we're trying to make in our programs, and that's particularly important here. So now that we've emphasized those questions, I'm going to turn it back over to Emily, and I'm just going to, before we get to the question, just emphasize it's a little helpful if we can get kind of more like clarification questions first, and then general questions, and then comments. But at this point, there's no particular restriction on how you would approach the questioning session. So,
Michael Ferrante, I've asked you to unmute.
Yes, thank you, Josh. Appreciate it. Good afternoon, everyone. I kind of just comments here. I find the MassSave matter to be incredibly complicated and one that can really needs to be addressed thoroughly. As you probably know, MassSave has made a ruling on this current year where whole home electrification projects to receive the $10,000 must remove or disable their system. So you already have that in place for the remainder of 2024. Obviously not sure when this early action program will take place, but that's a huge consideration. Maybe you've already thought of that. And secondly, very important, the next 3-year plan is clearly, with MassSave, is clearly going to remove any ability for a heating oil, propane, or even natural gas customer. It seems to me at this point, serving on the Energy Efficiency Advisory Council as I do, that there'll be no incentives for fossil fuel systems. So not only is this program going to be encouraging conversions from all fossil fuels to heat pumps, but those paying into the program, every customer in Massachusetts, basically that's using investor-owned electricity, is not going to be able to benefit from a program that they should. So I'm a little concerned about that. And the unweatherized home issue is also a concern, as you know, for MassSave in terms of installation of heat pumps. So just some general comments, but I'm sure these are all top of mind to you as well. And I appreciate the time to offer my concerns. Thank you.
Oh, yes, thank you for that comment. And we are following the MassSave plan process closely, and we'll continue to do so.
From Ben Butterworth, the footnote on page 1 mentions that full electrification projects that qualify under the early action program may receive administrative benefits in generating credit associated with operation. That language appears to communicate some uncertainty regarding whether these projects will or will not generate emissions avoided credits once the full CHS program is established in 2026. Can you add more detail as to how DEP is currently thinking about the uncertainty of emissions reduction credits for early action projects? Many of these early action projects will be operating well into the 2030s, so their ability or lack thereof to generate emissions reduction credits associated with operation will have a large impact on the clean heat standard market.
Yes, so our current thinking is that yes, they would be able to generate emissions reductions credits. Again, this is an early action program for discussion, but we did not intend to imply that they would not be eligible to generate emissions reductions credits.
Shelley Plissy, what are the clean heat checks? Are they points, dollar amounts?
So they are clean heat credits. These ones are full electrification credits, which are denominated in residential units. So like a home or an apartment. I direct you to our JEP program framework technical session for virtual community meetings that describe the Clean Heat Standard program more broadly, where there are two types of credits, these full electrification credits that are denominated in residential units, and then ongoing emissions reductions credits for operating clean heat that are denominated in greenhouse gas emissions reductions.
Chris Neem, can you say more about expectations regarding demonstration of eligibility for equity credits? I suspect many customers eligible for discount utility rates or other forms of assistance are not getting them because they have not applied. Do you envision some simple way to enable some customers to qualify, perhaps including residents in some designated census tracts?
So we are aware of the administrative challenges of identifying low-income customers, and we know that not everyone that's eligible for a low-income electric rate is on a low-income electric rate. So it's a problem that we're actively working on and seeking comment on. There are some downsides to using something like a census tract or geographic identifier that we're also working through and thinking about. So it's definitely a challenge, and we're open to suggestions and ideas about other ways to easily identify these types of consumers.
Cole Martin, sorry if I missed this earlier, but is there a timeline for when you expect to propose regulations to establish an early crediting program, and when you expect to have this early credit action system fully in place?
We don't have a specific timeline at this time. I don't know, Will, if you have anything to add.
No, I don't think we have anything to add, except that the point is that the credits, would be available potentially for projects that happen, before the regulation was finalized. That's been a practice in other sort of early action programs. So, but we don't have any timelines on specific rulemakings.
David Chu, are gas and electric heating systems eligible for credits if replaced by heat pumps? And if so, do those systems have to be replaced?
So for gas systems, yes, credits would not be available for replacing an electric heating system with a heat pump. Could you remind me what the second part of the question was, Josh? Sorry.
If so, do those systems have to be replaced?
Yeah, so as Angela described, you'd either need to remove all combustion equipment, so the old gas system, or commit to only using it during the heat pump downtime, so repair or servicing. That will be part of the attestation that we described in the application process.
Evan Pitsley, how do you anticipate obligated parties that are not electric suppliers to obtain the private income eligibility of a residence? This information would be needed to adequately quote an installation that involves a transfer of credits.
So this is a voluntary early registration program. So to receive the credits, you need to provide some amount of information. Appreciate the complexity that might offer, and happy to consider that comment.
Leslie Anderson, in terms of what projects should be ineligible for early registration, CHC should not be eligible for propane to heat pump conversions. Propane heating has overall lower greenhouse gas emissions than electric heat in Massachusetts, as propane's carbon intensity is 77 versus 100 to 140 carbon intensity for electricity.
Thank you. I think we'll take that as a comment.
Joe Uglietto, can you explain the rationale behind creating early action credits for the full electrification standard, but not the emissions reduction standard?
So I think we want to set up the administrative and crediting procedures, and also make clear that we don't want people to wait to install a heat pump if they're considering it, because they want to wait for the finalization of the full regulation. But there's no reason that they wouldn't be able to get emissions reductions credits in the future. There's not the same incentive to wait to receive that credit in a future program. If that makes sense.
As a reminder to folks, if you'd like to speak, you can use the raise hand function and I can unmute you. Zoe Eckert, what does an energy supplier do if they have a heat pump conversion but is not able to get all of the needed customer information now after the fact for your application? Was that installation now a waste in this concept?
I think that's a helpful comment for us to consider. I don't think there's any reason that you couldn't go back to the homeowner to request additional information, but we are interested in actively seeking comment on how we can minimize those administrative barriers. So be happy to hear thoughts on ways that we could address that.
David Chu, are non-Mass residents eligible for credits, say for their vacation homes in Mass?
So the building where the heat pump is installed needs to be located in Massachusetts. If the person that owns that building lives outside of Massachusetts, they could still get the credit for that building.
Evan Pitsley, will information provided in chats be considered public information?
I think some of it, but we're actively considering that and we're still building the system. And we'd be happy to hear comments on what types of information should or should not be made public.
Chris Neem, to address the requirement that the heat pump be installed by a licensed contractor, is there a database of such contractors that customers can easily access online to ensure they are hiring someone who meets the requirement? If not, can that be created?
So we do not currently have a database of that. We are asking to collect that information so that we could identify if there are problems in the future program implementation. But I will take that as something that we should consider.
Ben Butterworth, can you talk more about not crediting projects that go from 100% electric resistance heat to 100% air source heat pumps? Is the idea that MassSave would continue to incentivize this type of project moving forward, since they are fundamentally energy efficiency projects and it's outside the scope of the clean heat standard?
I think the short answer is yes. We're focused on emissions from combustion fuels. And so the eligibility that we've set out here would be for converting from fossil heating equipment to a heat pump rather than from electric heating to an electric heat pump.
Evan Rosenberg, I've asked you to unmute.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Evan Rosenberg. I'm the Director of Strategy with SREC Trade. We are an aggregator under these types of crediting programs across North America. I had a question and then a sort of a comment. The question is, what is the development and implementation timeline for CHETS? Is the expectation that the registry will be built and available to support the early action activities, or will there be some interim system set up? Obviously, we would encourage the former. And then my comment is regarding CHETS, of course, which is we strongly encourage MassDEP to consider developing API capability for the registry. So that would allow third-party software platforms to integrate with CHETS, which essentially just allows software to do what users can do. As we anticipate, many hundreds, thousands of individual applications being submitted, and there's a opportunity to streamline the way folks can participate in the program if they can actually do that in software rather than having to, submit one application at a time. So happy to talk more about how that's been successful in other similar types of programs. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks for that very helpful comment. And I think we don't have a specific timeline to share at this point. I think the intention is not that we would build a separate sort of administrative structure for the voluntary early action program, but that it would be through the CHETS platform itself.
Caleb Einwechter, as an aggregator acting as an authorized agent on behalf of clients, we've had success registering air source heat pumps through the receiving alternative energy credits through NEPOOL. Are AECs similar to CHCs with regards to air source heat pumps, and will this program replace AECs?
So conceptually, yes, they are a similar concept in that you're creating a credit from an air source heat pump. We have not indicated any intention that this would replace AEC, alternative energy credits, or the APS, the Alternative Portfolio Standard program at this time. But we are, as we mentioned, very interested in stakeholder input on how we can best interact with those existing programs.
Joe Uglietto, as a follow-up, why wouldn't you want to create early action credits for the emissions reduction standard, specifically biofuels? You mentioned that you want to allow early action credits for full electrification projects so that a homeowner will not delay installing the heat pumps. Do you have any concern about retail heating oil companies delaying selling blended biofuels until that program begins?
I think it hasn't been as much of a concern, but I would be happy to hear comments about it. Will, I don't know if you have something.
Yeah, I could add something. I think really what we're trying to do with the early action full electrification is get to someone that might be considering whether to replace a fossil system with a fossil system or electrify, and tell them that there will be something available, that they shouldn't wait to do that or reconsider it or something else based on the timeline of the program. We can't make particular commitments around that, but that's the general concept. The emission reduction credits are an annual accounting mechanism, so they don't really fall in the same kind of category as far as how we're thinking about it. But as we said, all aspects of this are open for comment, so we're happy to also take that as a comment that that's something we should think about.
Chris Neem, have you considered allowing early action credits for businesses' installations of heat pumps? Appreciate that adds some complication because of significant variation in equipment size, but perhaps that could be addressed by normalizing to certain capacity levels, e.g. 4 tons heating capacity equals 1 residential credit.
Or so right now it's focused on residential, and if you look at the draft program framework, that is because the full electrification requirement is specifically for residential electrifications. But we're happy to receive comments on how we should handle non-residential buildings.
I'm not seeing any unread questions or raised hands right now, so if folks have questions or comments or you'd like to speak, please use the raise hand function or put it in the chat. Jason Moran, what about someone building a new home that is 100% electric for heating? Would new home construction be eligible for this program?
Yes, so the way that we've written it now, new construction installing a heat pump would be eligible.
As we're waiting, pausing for additional things, maybe we should just flip to the next slide so people can be looking at the material here.
June Wooding, air source heat pump is being mentioned. However, you have also alluded in the past that geothermal heat pumps qualify. Can you clarify and also address if there is a networked geothermal install and how or if utilities get credit for a distribution loop?
So both air source and ground source heat pumps would be eligible through this program, and that includes a ground source heat pump connected to a network geothermal loop. The way that this program is set up, the crediting is per residence, so the presumptive ownership is on the building owner as opposed to the utility. But again, they have the option to sort of designate that to an authorized agent, to a third party.
Chris Neem, how would you know if the baseline for a heat pump installation was a fossil fuel system rather than electric resistance heat? Do you anticipate requiring some documentation of the baseline heating system or just customer or contractor attestation?
So I think we'd be very interested on comments about how we should handle that, but that would be part of the information that we would collect through the application.
Well, while we're taking kind of the last call for comments, we have on the screen now, address for written comments and also links and a thing you can point your phone at for to get on our email list. You can also sign up for email list on the webpage. I think one thing that's missing here is, Emily, we have a deadline also when we're looking for comments, I think. Can you remind everybody when that is?
Yes, we're asking for comments on this by February 16th. So if you could submit written comments to that email address by February 16th.
Great, thanks. So I think last call for questions and comments today. Anything from my team that we haven't said yet or need to get to? I'll pause another few seconds and then.
Chris Neem, have you posted your slides?
Yes, they are up on our website.
All right, that's always a good last question. So I guess we'll close it by thank you to everyone for participating, and we hope to keep hearing for you. So thank you very much.